It is such a pleasure to have all of you at the 7th of our 9th month in the cohort season together. Welcome. Welcome to the Land and Housing Coalition. We are a collective of over 60 congregations and communities across Oregon who are discerning and learning ways to steward our land, our people, our money, so that all Oregonians can find home. I am Reverend Julia Nielsen. I am the director of the coalition, and I do this work because the day that I moved to Portland, Oregon in 2014, it was May 21st, I had an encounter with someone living on the streets of our city, and it informed me, it compelled me, it convicted me, that interaction, that I would be working in housing, that I would be having to build housing and be a part of people building housing for those who are living outside, however long I served in the city. So that's why I'm here. We are part of a larger movement home we call the Sacred Organizing House. Some of you got even more familiar with the Sacred Organizing House at the Assembly on March 10th, which brings together teams of people committed to building a multi-faith, multiracial, multi-generational movement for justice in Oregon. And we are united by the shared practices of sacred organizing. Tonight, we continue to walk together through the sacred organizing spiral. We have been in sacred encounter. We have been in sacred unveiling. We are in sacred action. It's in this spiral that we learn how to listen to our neighbors, ourselves, and our land, where we reveal the needs and the pressures and the dreams that we have together so that we can take action with integrity. So thank you for being here. Tonight is special because we are going to learn how to identify the specific issues that we've heard in our one-to-ones, in our house meetings, and in our research meetings, so that we can move toward effective action that actually solves those issues. In community organizing, we call this issue cutting, like cutting paper, issue cutting. And tonight you're going to come away knowing what an issue cut is, what it is not, and get to experience a real one live through an active case study, which will be the Wichita Center in Clackamas County. You're going to get to connect what you hear in your own one-to-ones and house meetings with how to decide what to do with your core teams and with your community. And you're going to get a chance to start thinking about what an issue cut may be that's coming up in your own core teams listening. So here's where we weave all of the pieces together that we have been talking about throughout the year. That's what we're learning tonight. So before we do any of that, we need to make sure that we are all one people, that we are together, and that we're grounded. So I want to invite Chelsea to ground us spiritually and physically in the spaces that we're in.
Thank you so much, Jules. Hello, everyone. I hope you're all having a good evening. My name is Chelsea Tus. I am a companion with Live and Land and Housing Coalition, as well as a fellow with Together Lab. I said yes to doing this work because I care about houseless communities impacted by housing injustice. And I believe through collaboration and organizing, we can make a difference and create access. So, our grounding today is a poem, Cantares, by Antonio Machado, published in 1917 as part of his collection, Campos de Castilla. I will first read it in Spanish, pause, then read it in English. So here it is. Todo pasa y todo queda. Pero lo nuestro es pasar. Pasar haciendo caminos, caminos sobre el mar. Here is the English translation. Everything passes and everything remains, but our fate is to pass, making paths over the sea. As you think about issue cuts and potential actions in your own community, Let's remember the impacts we can have to make new paths. I would like to invite you all to take a moment and consider what new paths you're creating in your community. If you want to put those in the chat, feel free to share, but let's just take a moment to just let everything sit in. Thank you all. I will pass this along to Marianne.
Hi, my name's Marianne Barham, and I've been involved with the Levin Land and Housing Coalition for the past 3 years, both as a member of the core team at First Unitarian Church and as a companion to multiple other core teams. I continue to do this work because I'm passionate about community organizing as a way to bring about change in our communities and in the world at large. So we're going to take some time to do a couple one-on-ones. Well, you're each going to do one-on-one. You're going to have 10 minutes to discuss the following questions, and Jules will put them in the chat. The questions you need to be pondering are, what was a time when you had something overwhelming, but you needed to find the first best step, the next right step? What was overwhelming you about the pressures we are facing, and what's stopping you from feeling like you can do something? And let me repeat those. When was a time when you had to do something overwhelming, but you needed to first take the first step, the right next step? What was overwhelming you about the pressures we're facing, and what is keeping you or stopping you from feeling like you can do something? So Jules is going to put those questions in the chat, and Levita is going to break us into one-on-ones, and you're going to have 10 minutes, and then we'll come back and harvest some of the information you heard.
I'm an asylum seeker too, and we discussed the, how it is difficult for immigrants and asylum seeker to find housing because they left their country to find better place here in the U.S., but they couldn't connect with the resources and find housing and the commissioner. And I told her I feel what she is saying, and it is really challenging for all us as an asylum seeker, and it takes so long a process
Right.
for the everything, and that's me. And but we talk about overwhelm and hopefully to find solution to this problem for those family with their kids.
Okay. Thank you so much for sharing.
You're welcome.
Does anyone else want to share what they spoke about in their one-on-one? Just jump right in.
Hi, Marianne. I'll share. This is
Okay.
Jennifer. In my conversation, I think there was commonality around feeling like you're jumping into something and saying yes without necessarily knowing what's coming next, and trusting the process and trusting the people you're doing the process.
Nice. Thank you, Jennifer. So how about one last person that could share something? Anyone want to volunteer?
I'll volunteer.
Okay, thanks, Mary.
We discussed how people are different and how different people have different capacities to manage what can be really overwhelming pressures and demands.
Thanks, Mary. So I think at this point, I'm going to invite Jules to take over, and she's going to do a teaching exercise with us. So thank you, everybody, for sharing.
Thanks, Marianne, for handling us while we do our one-to-ones. It's so exciting to me, friends, to be able to talk about this with all of you and to be able to move us into the season of action. I know many of you have been already in action, but in the teaching spiral and in the sacred organizing spiral, sometimes we have to do things in a certain order in order to learn them. And that's where we are now. But I also know many of your teams are ready to move into the next phase. So what are we talking about tonight? I said it was issue cuts earlier. In order to determine the next faithful step toward action, we often have to identify that issue cut. So think about it this way. Often we face problems, right? Overwhelming problems, say like homelessness. And then we just get overwhelmed. What can we do about homelessness? We feel like we can do nothing until we break it down. And the question we ask in organizing is, what's the problem? Now, what's the issue? It's not just homelessness. It might be access to services. It might be lack of funding. It might be public animosity. Knowing the issue is helpful, but even that lack of funding isn't specific enough to act on. So that's where our listening helps us to drill down into the specific way the problem, homelessness perhaps, and the issue, lack of funding perhaps, are showing up in our specific community. So the specific place where you are, or where I am, or where we are together, so that we can take the wisest and most effective course of action. And I'm going to repeat that over and over again, wisest and most effective course of action, because we don't just want to act, we want to do it with intention. There's a difference between action and activity, and our habit is activity, but we want to take action. We want to do something that actually changes the world. So that's an issue cut. An issue cut is simply something that translates as a complex problem that is now in bite-sized pieces where we can realistically make a difference now as we move toward eliminating the larger problem using our organizing tools. You can think of it as a ladder or as a series of locked doors that we are unlocking until all the doors are open and there are no barriers. The thing is, though, that issue cuts are often not obvious. Maybe they're impossible to understand or even know until we listen using our organizing practices. So that's why we are always telling you all and always modeling one-to-ones, research meetings, house meetings, power mapping, and collective discernment gatherings, times when we get together and say, now what did we hear? Without doing those practices, we actually cannot have an issue cut. These are how we know what we're hearing from our community, so that we can go from, I'm mad about this big overwhelming problem, to, I know exactly what we have to do about it. But once we've done the listening, we've collected all those conversations, all of those stories, all of those barriers and pressures, we have to ask ourselves some questions. Now, there are lots of ways to ask these questions, and there are lots more questions we could ask. But I think that these are the ones that are the easiest to grab onto and the ones that help us get to the heart of the issue cut fastest. 1, what are the 3 or 4 names and stories that we are hearing as a community or as a team that show us that there might be an issue here? And the important part about this is you have to be able to name names. If you didn't have the conversation, you don't know their name, it's really important that you get to do that, because naming names is a part of organizing. You can't just say, we know this is a problem, if you haven't actually talked to people about it. 2, what barriers are those stories showing us? So we've had these stories, we've had these conversations, we've been in these house meetings. What did people say was pressing in on them specifically? What is the problem? And then 3rd, what or who would need to change to eliminate the barriers? And these are systems and people. And if your team cannot answer these questions, then it's not that you failed, it's just that you need to listen more. We just have to listen more. So I want you to remember this as we're having this conversation tonight. Issue cuts are not, what do I want to do? And they are not, what do I care about? Okay? They are not about the individual. They are what is widely and deeply felt beyond our individual and personal concerns, though they might include our personal concerns. So you have names, you know the barriers, and you know what system or person needs to change in order to move those aside and to change what's wrong. Or at least you maybe have some pretty clear idea of who they might be. Now we start to ask what we can do to take action. Only then do we start acting, right? And don't worry, we're going to practice all of this in just a few minutes. The easiest way, as you all know, to understand how to get to the real quote unquote cut of an issue in your own neighborhood or your own community is to watch somebody else do it. So in a moment, we're going to bring Story and Des up to help us dig into a live issue cut that's on the ground and active right now, taking shape in Clackamas County, where the problem, remember what I said, the problem is homelessness. The possible issue is lack of access to services. But the issue cut appears to be pushing to keep a place called the Wichita Community Center open that already provides those services in the neighborhood and is about to be shut down. So that's what we're going to do. I'm going to walk you through a worksheet, and I'm going to share it in English and in Spanish in the chat right now. And if you did not get a chance, I know I sent out an email to everyone saying, pull this up, print this out if you get the chance. If you didn't get to, go ahead and open it up now so you can follow along, or you can make a copy and take notes in your own copy on your computer while we're talking. So come on up, Des and Story. I'm going to ask you some questions about what your team's uncovering right now. And we'll have a little fishbowl.
Hello.
Hi. Hi, you two. Man, how is it in Clackamas County?
Oh, it's something. I will say that. It's something. Always is.
It's always something in Clackamas. I know it. Well, so we know that issue cutting is a discernment process. And we know that you all have been doing a lot of discernment. You have been doing a lot of listening this year. So I want to ask you some quick questions. And folks who are listening, I want you to pay attention closely to what I'm asking Des and Story and how they're answering me. How specific are they? If they're not specific enough, you could throw that in the chat and say, I need more information. Okay. So first of all, what teams are working on this? Who's on the team that's listening?
So one of the teams that is working on this is the Southeast Youth Collective. So that is myself and 2 other adult leaders, and then a whole bunch of teenagers and high schoolers who have gotten really activated around this issue because it affects them very deeply and very personally.
Okay. And what's the 1-minute explanation of what the Wichita Center is?
The Wichita Center is a resource building that has several different services: WIC, dental, hygiene closet, clothes closet. It's on a bus line. It has everything together so the whole family can be served, and it serves kids and families in the North Clackamas School District, whether they attend school there or not. If they live there, they can use it. So a family can come in, mom can come talk to the WIC office, kids can go to the food closet. So it's like a one-stop for very essential services that serve an underserved population in our district.
Okay. So we're going to dive deeper into this in a minute, but I just want the overview. What's the problem you're hearing, and what is the issue cut that you think you might take action on?
So the problem is manifested in a very clear way. The services and the school was served with a termination of agreement because the county owns the building. And they were served with the termination notice that says you have to be out by, I believe, July 1st. Des, is that right? Yes, July 1st. And so the school, the services, and many families in the community were immediately struck with this fear, foreboding. What are we going to do? This is actually irreplaceable. So what's going to happen next? And that has led us to an issue cut that is just a very direct, clear one of keeping the resources together and accessible. That those are the 2 important things, that they're accessible to those without reliable transportation, accessible to neighborhood, accessible to non-English speakers, and keeping them together in that way that has really just made it a place that 250 plus families a week can utilize.
Okay. Somebody asked, who runs the center? That might help us with the target question later.
The school actually is a part of it. Like the school kind of oversees it all. The North Clackamas School District does. Like I said, the county owns the building, and the North Clackamas Parks and Rec Department also factors into that. And then they lease out the offices to services. Some are school-based, some are like the McKinney-Vento liaison is there, so the homeless student liaison. So some of them are state services too.
So it's an interrelated collaboration between government and school district
Yes.
and private nonprofit stuff, but the people with the power right now are the government.
Yes, it is the Board of County Commissioners, and which is also the NCPRD.
Yeah, the Board of County Commissioners acting as the NCPRD, which they love to be very pedantic about.
Okay, we all love when government decides that they're going to take over something that wasn't theirs to begin with. Yes? All right. So we have a little bit of background, friends, and I want you all to look at page, I think it's page 3 on your worksheet on the English version and page 2 in the Spanish version. And that is what I put in the chat in a minute. We're going to be going into small groups in about 15 minutes, where you're going to talk about your own team's work on questions like this. So when I pause with Des and Story, you will need to answer based on your own team and what you're hearing on the ground in your context, not in Des and Story's context. So we're going to give you a chance to like answer the questions kind of the way that Des and Story are. Now, here's what I'll say. Des and Story have done a lot of work on this with their team. They have been working on this a minute. You will not probably have as much clarity as they have, and that's okay. This is how we do issue cuts, is piece by piece. Des and Story, were you all super clear on this with your team? Did your team know what they were doing early on around this? No. Okay. It's messy first, right? Okay. So let's go through the issue cut worksheet first. Can you name or tell, just very briefly, some of the specific people and stories that you talked to? Who is feeling the impact of the problem? And I'll ask the second question and then you can fill it in. What will change for them if you all move forward with the issue cut that you're proposing?
Well, everyone who was at Mass Assembly heard Vanessa's story, which relates very directly to Wichita. Another one of our students, Jenny, learned to speak English as well at the preschool program at Wichita. Her family continues to receive services there. She also has gone on to like help her classmates throughout the rest of her school career also learn English. And she has multiple younger siblings who will also be using this preschool program. So this is something that like has impacted her and like will continue to be a really important service that her whole family would feel the loss of.
Okay. Who else?
We have Jalam, who is the McKinney-Vento liaison at the Wichita Center, who through listening to him and hearing his stories of like frustration with county resources, naming that there are folks who are only heard and have access through the Wichita Center. They do not have access to the normal processes of getting resources, whether it's language, whether it's just not knowing how to access those things. So they are not reflected in county resources and who county thinks of. Wichita Center is the only place that does that for him. As the McKinney-Vento liaison, he's like, my hands are tied. I can only help people that are unhoused. I actually can't do anything for anyone else. And Wichita is the only place I know to send them. So for him, keeping them there and together is a clear pathway that he now has access to for referral for families that he would not have.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anyone else that you think is a really powerful name or story that you think this room needs to hear about?
Another one is Melissa Earlbaum. She's the executive director at Clackamas Women's Services. And she has been really key in kind of naming for us a frustration at a county level of how the access points and the data they collect around those who are unstably housed or who are right on the edge very much favors white single men, and Wichita centers families. And that's just not a pathway that the county thinks in. So her being able to name that, oh, the Wichita Center, again, is just this unique place where families and non-English speakers have access to resources that are otherwise almost impossible for them to access.
Got it. I'm gonna stop us there. Everybody in the room, you've just heard how Des and Story were able to name people, different kinds of people, different stories that have different barriers or would benefit in different ways from keeping the Wichita Center open or keeping those accessible services together. So I want you to think about the one-to-ones and the conversations and even just things you know because you live where you live and you work and worship where you do. What do you know that your own team has been listening to? And I want you to try to answer those questions about your own core team's work. Who are the stories? Just name the names. You don't have to get big about it. What barriers are they experiencing? What are they saying are the pressures that they're actually experiencing? Get as specific as possible. And don't overthink this. I don't want you to overthink it. Just write down what you know. I'm going to give you a moment to do that now. So just take a minute while Des and Story and I hang out and start making those notes for yourself. And then we'll move on to some other questions in a moment. Try to name at least 2 stories, but 3 to 4 would be great. All right. Keep thinking. And maybe some things will come to mind while we keep moving through. The way that issue cut works is it's not a straightforward linear process. You think of something and then you're like, oh, wait, that I forgot. And then we wrestle and wrestle and wrestle. We're also asking you to do something hard, which is to not do this with your team in front of you as a community, all talking to each other right now. So it's a little bit of a false example, but because Des and Story's team have gotten to do this all together in one place. But try to just at least apply the questions to your own learning so that you can take this back to your teams and do it together. All right, Story and Des, let's keep moving. We use a word in organizing. We say target. And what we mean by that is the person or the system that you're going to put specific pressure on to make that change that you want to make. So who's your target and how does your target have the power to say yes? Why do they have power at all?
So our target is the board of the North Clackamas Parks and Recreation District, which is also the same people as the Board of County Commissioners. They act in 2 roles. And because they are in charge of the Parks and Rec District, which is technically who owns the building, they have the final say on who they get to sell the building to, essentially.
Okay. And where does that target stand, and have you power mapped them around this and knowing like who's where on what part of it?
Yes, we have, one of the big tensions is that they've done much of this in executive session. So we have not been able to hear from them, but we've been able to put pressure on them, listen in other meetings. And we know that there are 2, Paul Savis and Martha Schrader, who are at least sympathetic to it. One of our commissioners is been gone and will be gone for like 5 weeks, but so we don't know exactly where he stands. He's been west, but we can guess that him, Tootie Smith, and Mark Scholl are going to be looking at it with more of an eye of who can we sell this to get the most money out of it. So we have a sense of kind of where they would be close to landing on the issue.
How'd you learn that?
We have had a relationship with them for a long time. We have we're in connection also with a lot of people who on the school board and former teachers who have relationships with them, and other people that are running for Board of County Commissioner who have like called them up to talk to them and then have come back to us to say, oh, this is what Martha said about this, or this is what Savis said about this. And also we have gone to the Board of County Commissioners to ask them at a board meeting.
Okay. So what I'm hearing is because of you've built and taken time to build relationships, not just with them, but also with people who know them or might be in competition with them, you're gathering information and keeping track of who's moving where. Is Ben West on this side today or is he on that side today? And that's a moving target sometimes, but you're keeping track of it.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So I want everybody to stop. Same thing here. given what you're working on, either with your team or in a larger community way through your team, what system or person do you think right now is the pressure point you need to press on to make the change and stop the suffering that's happening in your community around the issue cut you think you're in? Now be specific, name names. We always say it, name names. Don't say city council, right? Des and Story said Clackamas City Council. I was like, who are they? Tell me who they are. Which ones? Who's on your side? So you want to say Rene Gonzalez, because we learned that he's the Portland City Commissioner of Public Safety. And our issue cut is about installing a sidewalk and a crosswalk at this intersection that's dangerous, right? You get real specific. So I want you to name, and for some of us, it might be, I need to move my bishop. Bishop Lori Larson Caesar needs to do X, Y, and Z so that this land is released so that we can build affordable housing on it. I don't know. Be specific. I'm going to give you a couple minutes. Who's your target? And the questions are in the chat for you. Where do they stand? Where do you think they stand on what's important to you? Moving on, Story and Des. This is a big one. This is how we measure whether or not we can actually do this thing, right? How do you know that you have the power that because we're with you, right? Like we're all in this together. How do you know we have the power and the energy to change it? Is it what we call winnable, right? Do enough people care about this to show up for it? Do they have self-interest? And do we have a team with the capacity to lead us forward to actually get something done and make the change you need? How do you know?
So for us, it has included, so we answer to that question is yes. And that was through, again, that process of listening. What we've seen very clear is that people from all the different areas we organize in. So we have teachers, former teachers, McKinney-Vento liaisons, direct service providers, those who are closest to the issue, and then people that have used the services, so those who are most impacted, just be immediately activated by this, which Des can speak to with the Southeast Youth Collective. That and I think where I saw it very closely was working with faith communities, where we saw both kind of the old guard who have maybe considered some of the housing work kind of a little social justice club that we kind of keep to the side. They were activated by it too. They had energy and they wanted to be a part of the base. This was a bridge issue that enough of them were close to because of caring about students, volunteering at the Wichita Center, donating to the Wichita Center, that they know what a loss this would be. So they were immediately activated by it. So we had 500 plus people sending emails, sending letters, showing up at BCC meetings. So we knew that there was this immediate collective buy-in from so many people in our community.
You used a word that we use sometimes, and I just want to name it. Story just said base, B-A-S-E in English. And all that means is the group of people who are agreeing to act together on the things that matter to them, right? On one thing that matters, a base of people. So you actually have, because you've been working in Clackamas County a long time, not specific to this, you actually have a large base of people who will come. And it sounds like you have a base of people who will come along on this in part because they trust you and the work that everybody has done from this team in the past. So they're like not even related necessarily. They just have trusting relationships. Is that true?
Yes. A lot of the initial team that kind of started with this, it was through, we got connected through, oh, we knew that you did this during Project Turnkey. We knew you were connected to advocating for the keeping the DEI office in Clackamas. We did organizing around that. So as these different actions had taken place, the people that did those with us that we were building were moving forward with us.
Okay. All right, we're going to stop. Friends, again, think about not just your team, but this room. We are in this together, right? When Barbie's Village was happening, how many of you showed up? When Project Turnkey was happening last year, how many of us were down in Clackamas County ready to act? around the asylum seeker stuff that was happening this last week, how many people in this room, even though you aren't an asylum seeker, but you know somebody who is, or you feel convicted by it, you went to one of those events, you did action around it, you sent an email, you moved some elected official, right? We are in this together. So it's not just about your team, but it is about your team too. Do you know around your thing that you have the necessary power to make the change that your team is talking about? Does it feel like a challenge? Issue cuts should probably be a little challenging. Otherwise, what change are we making? It can feel like a challenge, but does it feel doable in the nearest future? Whatever you have, is it out far enough on the horizon that it makes a difference, but not so far out that you can't get there? So take a minute and think through that for your own team and your own community. Here's the thing that I will say to you about what Des and Story just answered for us. It's about building the right base, right? So you can have a smaller base if it's the right people who are willing to do the work. You can have 1,000 people, but if they're not willing to actually organize and turn up for stuff, not the right thing, right? So it's when you're thinking about this, don't think, oh my God, we can't do it because we don't have 1,000 people. Think, do we have the right 10 people for the size of the thing we're trying to do? Are they the right ones? Think about the power that a team can have when you're convicted and committed. All right, so now we're on to my favorite part. This is my favorite part, and I think it's one of the most important questions in organizing. Issue cuts are only the first faithful step in a chain of action, right? It's a big problem. We are unlocking a series of doors so that we can walk through them and there's no barriers to solve that ultimate problem. So, Des and Story, how do you know, and maybe some of this is just heart knowledge, but I want more than that. How do you know that this will build more power for future action? What's it going to make possible later? And why the heck is it yours to do? Why is this team the one to do it, not somebody else?
I think what we've seen from like Turnkey and from like DEI, both of those were like ultimately like unsuccessful in the sense that what we wanted didn't happen. But we have like already kind of like built this base of folks and this group of leaders that we know we can rely on. And so knowing that like something like this is going to keep building those leaders. And I think especially for me, like we have a couple teams, one of whom is a lot of like former and current educators and community members and school board members. And then we also have this group of young people who are deeply activated and moved by it. And so for me, as someone who is really involved with youth, seeing them get activated and them being able to hone their voice and speak in front of people, like to me, that is so significant in building power for future action, not just for now, but for like, frankly, decades to come, because these are like young kids who are like learning their voice and learning their power and learning that what they say matters and that they can make a difference in their community.
You all should just like take a minute, because that's real organizing right there. Des just describe something that is one of the greatest tests of whether or not we should take action on something. Will we be able to build leaders? Will there be new leaders built, or people learning new levels of leadership in their own lives, in their community around organizing, who will like walk that up that ladder and feel their power in a new way? One of the questions we always want to ask is, how will people feel their power in a new way? So what Des just described answers that question really clearly. And it could be in small ways, it could be in big ways, right? More people know how to tell their public story. More people know how to make a relationship across difference. More people know how to talk to an elected official about something that's important to them, or they know they're not alone, right? So all of those pieces are important. I want you to take a minute, and it's going to be super short because it's mostly intuition. Answer this for your own team, please. What is your possible issue cut in your community and the work you're doing there right now going to make possible if you pursue it? How will it make things possible that are not possible now? How do you know it'll build power? So let's just take a minute and answer that question. And I'm gonna let Story and Des fade off into the ether and take a break. Thank you all. Thank you for sharing all of your stories with us. That is a question that I want you to work on long beyond this meeting. But can we just give like some Zoom celebration for the work that the Wichita Center team, that the youth team, that the Clackamas County folks are working on? They've been putting their heart and soul into this and building a lot of leaders, and it's really amazing. So remember, issue cutting is a discernment process that we do together. So if you are working through the worksheet for your own team and you're getting stuck or you're feeling like you're not sure, your companion, your team, your larger community is a part of making the final call on what to do. You're not alone, and you do not have to make those decisions by yourself. Tonight, we're just practicing. So now Chris De La Cruz is going to give you a chance to share in pairs what you're thinking about. You took some notes. Crappy first draft, friends. You do not have to have perfection. This is not what organizing is. I want you to, given what you listened to the Wichita Center team talk through their own issue cut, what now is your thinking like around your own team and the work that you're doing? So I'm going to turn it over to Chris.
Thanks, Jules. Yes, my name is Chris De La Cruz. I use he, him pronouns. And as a director of youth initiatives at Together Lab and helping the Sacred Organizing House alongside organizers like Des think through youth leadership in the house, I've been privileged of just coming alongside the Southeast Portland Youth Collective team. And it was, I walked through the Wichita Center with them. It was both incredibly heartbreaking how this center, impactful for so many families, could be threatened, but so exciting to hear about the young folks organizing for themselves, identifying a clear issue cut that in other organizing teams, a bunch of adults can pick and are going for it. And now we will break into pair. Adults are great. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect. I didn't realize I put a criticism of adults in there. We're all figuring this out. But youth are great. Now we will break into pairs and try finding issue cuts within our own teams and contexts. We have the issue cut worksheet. You've been working with it. And now think about your own core team, your own context, and just share what you've been writing down. And particularly, we have 4 questions. You have 4 questions that will be in the chat, right, Jules? And you'll have kind of just, are we still sticking with the 5 minutes, right? So we're not going to be able to kind of dig deep, but go on, Jules. Yeah.
People have 10 minutes.
People have 10 minutes. I knew that didn't seem right. That I'm sure that was my own typo. And so the prompts are in the chat. What are the 3 to 4 names and stories you're hearing that show you there might be an issue here? What barriers are those stories showing you? What or who would need to change to eliminate them? Which system, which person? And what questions on the worksheet did you realize your team needs more to talk about? We'll come back and have a debrief, so that'll be fun. So I send you off. It is not what I really wanted. It's more like we will all be sent off together. I do not have that power.
So I want to invite you, we have 10 minutes together to do a little debrief and evaluation of what you just learned and experienced. So I want you to take a minute and think about the stories and details you heard from Des and Story about the Wichita Center's team and the youth work that's happening there. And I want you to think about what you experienced about your own team and the conversation you just had with somebody else. And just see what lands and sticks. What are you keeping from those conversations? All right. Given what you all learned tonight and what you practiced, if you had to take all of this back to your team, to somebody else who couldn't be here this week, what is sticking with you the most? Go ahead and just unmute yourself and shout it out or put it in the chat.
Jules,
Yep.
that was a really great one-to-one, because I was like, well, I don't get this issue because we're already at kind of a later stage than that. And of course, the realization was we need to be doing this process for the next step, which is coming up to define. And I think it's always helpful to have that little pyramid-y thing, the little graph that will help our group go, okay, what's the next issue that we need to be, what's the next layer?
Nice.
So I appreciate that.
Good. Diane's pointing out something really important. Because it's a ladder, you think you've solved one thing, good job. But now you've opened the door for the possibility to solve the next layer. So keep on listening, keep on doing that work. Diane, thank you for bringing that up. I'm seeing Allison, we need to listen more to the people more directly affected by the problem. That's really helpful observation. I think that's a super common experience of folks in an organizing space, especially at this stage of where y'all are, is that you realize, oh, we got maybe, we need more listening with folks who are impacted, and let's go find those folks and be in relationship with them. So we're real clear on the pressures. What do you feel like, Allison, that listening will give you that your team doesn't have yet?
Right now, I think that we have a problem that the team has identified that they care about, and they have a lot of possibilities. We have a lot of possibilities with a decent amount of land and buy-in to do something, but we don't know what is ours to do. And we don't know really what's most needed right now.
Okay. Yeah. So it's a great problem to have. We have resources. Now, who do we listen to specifically to make sure that we're doing the right and most wise thing with those resources? That's great. Okay. You see, every team is in a different space, y'all. Like, you start somewhere, we're just working the spiral, bouncing back and forth between unveiling and listening and action. There's all of this movement. It's not as linear as sometimes we make it sound in order to learn it. So it's okay to go backwards a little bit. It's not backwards. It's just adding to the layers. What else comes up for folks? Anything else?
Well, Julia, as myself, I'm an asylum seeker and I struggle. I feel what the asylum seeker family struggle right now. They are more likely, they become homeless if the commissioner don't take a stand. Because I talked with David in the room. I said, this is a something like a human right, housing, especially housing is basic human right. And I struggle, but I'm lucky, I got help from my from my church. But other people who came here without English language, without anything, and they came here and they struggle and they went wait in welcome center at the hotels, and the $29 million fund is gone, and now they are struggling to find places. And it's a lot of pressure in the Catholic Charity, Lutheran, Housing, Lutheran, and Westminster, and other churches, non-profits. But why the state don't fund housing to make it much easier,
Yeah. So I know, Michelle, as you've been working on this asylum seeker advocacy and organizing, one of the things with your issue cut is it's so big, right? It includes so many major entities, the state of Oregon, that it's so many things, and it impacts so many people. And so one of the questions that I think is important for your team is, how do we build a bigger base of allies, folks who are willing to show up, who are maybe not asylum seekers, but have voice and power and are willing to do that, so that we can move this really big thing. Because remember, folks, we talk about power, it's like a lever, right? You can have a huge stone, you can't get it to move, but if you have the right lever, you can get it to move even with just a little bit of energy. So this is what Michelle and the asylum seeker team are dealing with, is they got to move a lot of things with very little energy. And so how do we get more energy for them? How do we build the base? Awesome, Michelle. Thank you so much. I know you guys have been working really, really hard, especially in the last week. All right, I want to ask you a question, all of you. What would you have the most trouble explaining to your team? What do you need the most support around in order to move your team forward on whatever issue you're seeing right now? It's okay to not know, and it's great to ask. So where are you feeling the most tension? No tension? I find this hard to believe. What's the question again? Allison says, where are you gonna, election tension? Yes, thank you, Michelle. We're all feeling that. If you had to take this back to your team, what would you feel like you were missing? What do you still need? What support do you not have in order to be able to move this forward for your folks? We're talking about the practices and the tools and things, right? You can't say, I need $1 billion. That's not what I'm looking for, though I would love to give it to you. Yeah, Marianne, what do you have?
I would just say that, and I think this is true for a lot of teams, that there's a tension between choosing an issue cut that is manageable, which feels like it's not big enough because there's so much you want to accomplish, but to actually choose something that's feasible and doable versus like saying, well, we need to fix this, but you don't have the capacity yet to fix that. So I think there's a tension there about, well, this little thing we're talking about isn't enough.
Yeah, that's, I wonder if other people in the room are feeling that. I think that's really natural. And here's what I say to folks all the time is two things. One, it's more than is happening now, no matter how small it is. So go for it. And two, often what you find is you start an issue cut and you realize it's not courageous enough. And then all of a sudden you realize, nope, we know exactly what to do. It's just taking that first step forward to say, I think we have enough information to try. And then all of a sudden you're like, nope, we know we can push a little harder. We can go a little bit bigger. So it's better to go a little smaller than you think at first if you're practicing and you're not sure, so you don't make any big missteps. And you can always bring more people and more wisdom into the room. If you feel stuck, ask for wisdom. Ask senior organizers to come and help you all map the problem. Ask your companion to come and think through storytelling or new people who can add to the team with you. Talk to your organizer and say, we don't know if this is the right size or shape for what we're trying to do. Are we headed in the right direction? And your organizer is going to be able to give you some guidance. You have help. You have help. I'm seeing Irvin saying like impatience on the team. Impatience is the enemy of organizing. You have to be both like agitated and patient, right? And by patient, I don't mean tolerant. I mean persistent. Paced, right? Paced. So, all right, friends, I'm going to stop us there with this reminder. Joanne had said this in the chat. My team is suffering personal problems and it's hard to ask for more. That is a real thing to observe and to feel. And I think a lot of people are in that space. And here's what I'll say. Remember that anything that's worth organizing for is organized for by the people who are most pressed in on by it, right? So the people with the most self-interest in the civil rights movement, people were organizing at 5 a.m. and at 2 a.m. and at 10 p.m. after work, around work. Like that's in the farm workers movement, people are organizing despite having no resources and not the language, right? When it's really important to people, they will organize for it. So one of the questions to ask is on the worksheet. Do we have the capacity to do this? And do we have the willingness and the will, right? And that's a real question to ask around an issue cut. So Joanne, if you're asking that question, you're asking the right question. Is this important enough to enough people to actually move? Or do we need to do something a little smaller that people do have the capacity for? Right. But if it's super important to people, they'll make the time. If it's not, then that's a good measure of how important it is to people or where their lives are. Because sometimes we just can't, and that's okay. That's all right. All right. I want to take us into next steps. Y'all have done a lot of work tonight, and it's very exciting stuff. And I can't wait to see what your teams are up to. Don't forget to talk to your organizers. Our next gathering is on May 2nd, same time, same location, same Zoom. And we are going to be talking about how to respond to urgent flashpoints. So those moments when something gets real active and real reactive, and you have to make a decision, and how to take wise action. Also, save the date for June 10th, our recalentado, which is the reheating of the 1,000 people stories that are going to be told at the statewide house meeting campaign. You're going to get an invite in the mail from me if you're signed up on the newsletter, which I'm going to put in the chat right now. If you are not getting emails from me about where to be and what to do, it's because you're not on the coalition newsletter. So make sure you sign up and you will get that information. Also, homework for the month. Start planning a house meeting. If you haven't, you learned those in February. Start planning a house meeting with the folks you've had one-to-ones with. You can sign up to get trained on how to host or facilitate. And I'm going to share that link as well so that you can do that. If you have never hosted a house meeting in your life, we are going to offer 8 trainings this month, both in English and Spanish, on how to do it so that you can learn to facilitate or host. They start next week. And then finally, I just want to remind you that you want to be having your one-to-ones, because you cannot do any of these things we talked about tonight if you're not building powerful relationships. So that's it. That's all we need for the month. Do your house meetings, start planning those, talk to your organizer, your companion about how to do it. They have all the resources you need. You don't have to create them on your own. And also make sure that you RSVP when you get the email for the recalentado, because you're going to want to hear what is happening across the state and all the stories that we are working with. With that, we are complete. It's been so good to see all of you. Welcome back after a month away from each other online. Enjoy the weather if you have good weather where you are, and we will see you on May 2nd at the very latest. Thank you all. Thank you for all the organizing you're doing and the way you're making our world better. Good night.
Paso las noches.
Ooh. Pavita, that's quite a thing. I want to live on that deck. Whose deck is that?